Some economists fear that the Fed, humbled by staying too long and saying transitory, is now staying too long in terms of raising, and we don't know yet. We haven't had an earnings season. We don't know how it's really affecting things. They may break something. We may already be in a sharp slowdown. Maybe they stay at this party too long, the tightening party. You don't think so?
So there's two elements to this. Can they stop? Can they pivot? No, they cannot. They cannot because the data doesn't give them enough of a green light. But importantly, their credibility has been hit really hard. Will they end up overdoing it? Most likely, yes. So they've gotten themselves into this hole, and unfortunately, they don't know how to get out of this hole. There's no ladder out of this hole. People have to realize there's no ladder out of this hole.
Article from Bloomberg says El-Erian sees danger that the Feds will do too little on inflation. He says Powell faces tricky task of dual mandate on economy, and a stagflation threat exists if inflation melds with recession. Let's read more. Investors hunger for a hint from the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on Wednesday that the central bank may soon pivot from its path of stepped-up interest rates. That worries market strategist Mohamed El-Erian. Inflation is more problematic than what a downshift now would imply, El-Erian said, chairman of Gramercy Funds and Bloomberg Opinion. Columnist said on Bloomberg Television, The Open, the risk is that they will do too little, and that's the higher risk going forward. The Fed is expected to raise rates by 75 basis points, extended its most aggressive tightening campaign since 1980. The decision will be announced at 2 p.m. in Washington, and Powell will hold a press conference 30 minutes later.
Historical record cautions strongly against prematurely loosening policy. We will stay the course until the job is done.
Against the fastest inflation in 4 decades, he may emphasize policymakers remain steadfast while leaving options open in their fight for their December gathering, with markets split between another big move or a shift to 50 basis points. A recent rally in the stocks and bonds signaled that some investors are anticipating a slowdown in rate hikes, figuring the Fed and other central banks will do enough to stem inflation while not causing economies to fall into recession. El-Erian, who said more than a year ago that the Fed was behind the curve in addressing inflation, is concerned that, quote, we are slowly slipping into stagflation. We may end up not doing enough on the inflation side and then end up in a recession for Europe, near recession for the U.S., and for China. And while critical of Powell and the team, El-Erian made clear they are in a really tricky position. Quote, if I was sitting at the Fed right now, I would struggle in terms of where I would end up because the market has run away once again. End of quote. Powell is trying to optimize across 3 dimensions, all of which speak his dual mandate of keeping inflation in check while helping the U.S. economy. This is a tough meeting for the Feds. Let's see more, guys. Editor, roll clips. Fair use.
You saw the Goldman Sachs report. What do you think is really in the cards at this point?
So they are looking at inflation. They're looking at how persistent inflation has become. And they are saying, therefore, the Fed's going to have to go even higher. But the rate at which it gets there slows down. So it's the old thing between how high, how fast, how long, the HFL. And what we do know is it's the F that's most problematic for the markets. It's the fast bit. So to the extent that the Fed can get away with slowing, I think this market can try to navigate the higher for longer. So look at the pace. The pace is really important. If the pace stays where it is now, then we're going to have this liquidity rally, which has been incredibly rewarding, once again being challenged by fundamentals.
Does this little rally make sense to you? I mean, some people think that this is the beginning of something. Some people think this is a grand head fake.
I think Joe summarized it very well. This is a market that repeatedly falls in love with liquidity and therefore rallies. But the sustainability of those rallies is only there if you get fundamentals improving. That is the lesson of the last 2.5 years. Now, when you're in that rally, it's incredibly powerful, it's incredibly rewarding, but then you get the fundamentals.
Right.
So looking forward, and I am among the people who don't know, looking forward, the question is, when will fundamentals validate a liquidity rally? And that's the big question. So far, fundamentals haven't validated it, and that's why people are worried that we're going to test the lows yet again.
You'd be in agreement with the camp that is saying we may have seen some gains in recent days, but don't get fooled into thinking that we're through the crisis at this point?
So I think we have overcome interest rate risk and inflation risk. We've fully incorporated that. I think we are starting to understand credit risk, recession, etc. What we haven't got our arms around as a market is market functioning risk, liquidity risk. And that's the one thing I'd keep my eye on. I think that still has to play out as the Fed continues to march up with its interest rates.
But you don't think it should slow the Fed's role in terms of what they're doing with higher interest rates?
Look, I'd rather the Fed not be late. I'd rather the Fed not having to increase rates so quickly. But given that it's so late, I don't think they have a choice. I think the alternative of not reacting will be worse for the economy and will be worse for the markets long term.
But you were tweeting about a few things last night, just some concerning trends that you're starting to see with consumers in terms of what they're doing with credit cards.
Yeah, so revolving credit is now at a record high. It's gone up by 9% in the last year, keeping up with inflation, but it's still at a record high. And what we're seeing is a segmentation of the consumer base. So while consumers in general have a strong balance sheet, while the labor market in general is strong, once you look at the composition, so if you are selling to the lower income segments of the population, you're seeing significant declines in sale. And that's what's happening, is we're seeing a segmented household sector emerging.
Mohammed, you've been very worried about a hard landing for a long time. Is there any chance we actually are in for a soft landing? You saw GDP numbers better than people had expected, which I think gave some comfort to the folks at Treasury and probably at the Fed.
Look, I'm not yet in the camp that a recession is 100%. I do think the probability is uncomfortably high. I wouldn't put it 100%. So is there some possibility of a soft landing? Yes, but it is meager, Andrew, unfortunately. For a soft landing to have happened, the Fed should have started moving a year ago, not waited and then had to front load all these rate increases.
Hey guys, it's Jose, your regular Joe Blow again, keeping an eye out and my ears open to Mr. El-Erian about the tricky situation the Feds are in and the recession looming ever so closer because of the Fed's lack to have moved faster and came to try to tame inflation in a slowpoke way that will bite them in the butt. Soon, do your own research and prepare, guys, because they are not pivoting, plus continue to stay behind the curve of even trying to control inflation. And like I said before, that 2% CPI goal won't happen anytime soon. So the best we can do is move forward, guys. Thank you always for the support, and I'll continue to do my best to bring you the best. Stay free.